You've probably felt it, that strange, almost magnetic pull toward the very behaviors you once swore you'd never repeat. The way you sometimes hear your voice echo with the tone of someone who once wounded you. The way your reactions mirror patterns you promised yourself you'd outgrow. As if the past is using your own body as a stage to replay old scenes. And you catch yourself thinking, why am I like this? Why do I sound like them? Why do I act like someone I didn't want to become? It's a quiet, haunting paradox. You spend your life outrunning ghosts, only to find them hiding in the architecture of your own mind, whispering through your mannerisms, living behind the shades of your expressions. You try to scrub them out, to deny the resemblance, to bury the echoes, but in the still moments, when the world softens and your guard slips, you feel that old presence rise again like a ripple beneath the surface of your consciousness. You begin to realize that imitation is not a choice. It is a survival mechanism, a kind of psychological gravity, an unseen force that pulls you toward the familiar, even when the familiar is painful. And so you sit with this truth, a little unsettled, a little curious, wondering what it means about you, about your past, your identity, and your freedom. But before you can make sense of it, something else emerges, a deeper question, a quiet one that waits behind your ribs like a pulse. If I've been shaped by those who hurt me, then who am I really? And can I ever become something else? Most people wander through their days without noticing how these invisible inheritances guide them. They move through crowded rooms, office hallways, morning commutes, and late-night phone calls, believing they act freely, unaware that they are repeating dances choreographed years before they could even name what was happening to them. You've seen it, the colleague who talks just like their hypercritical father, the friend whose laughter hides razor-thin defensiveness learned from a childhood of walking on eggshells, the parent who swears they'll raise their child gently but catches themselves repeating harsh tones they once feared, as if old scripts were tattooed into their reflexes. You can watch people at a family gathering and observe entire generations, replaying themselves, facial expressions passed down like heirlooms, coping mechanisms traded like hand-me-down clothing, emotional rhythms synced to ancestral wounds. Yet nobody seems to notice, not really. They chalk it up to personality, temperament, preference, just how I am. But beneath the surface, something deeper is moving, a psychological inheritance shaped by modeling, mimicry, and the silent lessons absorbed through years of exposure. And the strange thing is, the more familiar the pattern, the more invisible it becomes. You walk into a room and unconsciously adjust your posture to mirror the emotional climate. You soften your voice to avoid triggering someone's temper, or you sharpen your tone to defend your place in a hierarchy that no longer exists. And all the while, you tell yourself it's just instinct. But instinct is often just memory in disguise. You imitate the people around you because your brain is wired to do so, wired to copy, absorb, internalize. Albert Bandura called it observational learning. But to you, it feels more like living in a house built by hands you never asked to guide you. And slowly, subtly, it becomes clear that most of what you call yourself didn't begin with you at all. It began with the people who raised you, hurt you, loved you, or abandoned you. The people who taught you through their actions what safety looked like, what love felt like, what anger sounded like. And now, every time you move through the world, their fingerprints appear in the way you speak, the way you argue, the way you withdraw, the way you love. You might notice it most in the quiet, domestic moments. Someone makes a small mistake, and before you even think, your reaction flares in a way that feels foreign, like it belongs to someone else because it does. Or maybe you apologize too much, shrink too quickly, accommodate too easily, not because you're weak, but because you learned early that this was how you stayed safe. Or maybe you become overly controlling, perfectionistic, hyper-independent, not because you're naturally rigid, but because chaos once taught you that certainty was a form of protection. So many of the traits you carry are not flaws, but adaptations, crafted from necessity, shaped by survival, inherited from the very people who made you feel small, afraid, or unseen. And as you begin to observe these patterns with clearer eyes, something inside you tightens, a mix of recognition and sadness, a quiet mourning for the years you spent believing that these pieces of you were permanent. Because now you see the illusion. Most people aren't choosing their patterns. Their patterns are choosing them. They are acting out of reflex, not reflection. They are copying pain, because pain was their first teacher. They are repeating behaviors not because they want to, but because the brain prefers the familiar even when the familiar is harmful. And maybe the most heartbreaking part is this: they don't even know. They don't realize that their anger is inherited, that their silence is a learned response, that their self-doubt was planted in them long before they grew old enough to question it. They think they're living consciously, but they are living predictively. They are not acting from the present. They are acting from residue. And the illusion continues, generation after generation, until someone sees it, really sees it. And that someone might be you. And then, somewhere between exhaustion and clarity, something shifts. You begin to awaken, not in a dramatic explosion of insight, but in a quiet, almost fragile moment where the world feels slightly off its axis, and you sense the machinery beneath your thoughts. It might happen in the middle of an argument when you suddenly hear yourself using someone else's words, or during a moment of tenderness where you can feel an instinct pulling you back, fearful of vulnerability that once felt dangerous. Or maybe while brushing your teeth late at night, when your reflection looks unfamiliar because you see not just yourself, but the lineage of behaviors resting behind your eyes. It's subtle at first, but undeniable. You catch the pattern in motion. You feel the weight of an inherited reaction forming inside you, like a wave building before it breaks, and for the first time, you don't let it break automatically. You pause, you notice, you intervene. And in that single breath of awareness, you begin to separate who you were taught to be from who you could become. It's disorienting, almost eerie, to realize how much of your internal world has been shaped by watching someone else, absorbing their emotional contours as if they were maps to follow. You start to see that your reactions have a genealogy, that your fears have a history, that your impulses were learned long before you could speak. And with this realization comes a strange blend of fear and liberation. Fear, because it means you've been moving on autopilot for years, maybe decades. Liberation, because now, for the first time, you can choose to step out of the script. But awakening isn't gentle. It's not the warm glow of enlightenment you hope for. It's sharp. It's destabilizing. It's like waking up in a room where all the furniture has been rearranged. You look around your mind and realize nothing is where you thought it was. And with awakening comes something else, something heavier. Isolation. Not the kind born from being alone, but the kind that grows from seeing too clearly. The moment you begin noticing the pattern in yourself, you begin noticing it everywhere. In conversations. You catch the echo of a parent's criticism hidden in someone's tone. In a friend's over-apologizing. You recognize the shadow of an old fear that was never theirs to carry. In the rigid silence of a partner, you sense the remnants of a childhood where emotions were dangerous. You walk through the world as if you've lifted a veil and uncovered an entire ecosystem of inherited pain. And the more you see, the harder it becomes to unsee. There's a loneliness in that clarity, a sense that you've stepped outside the unspoken agreement everyone else still lives inside the agreement to pretend we are self-made, unshaped, untouched by the past. But you no longer have that luxury. You've crossed a threshold. You've begun to recognize the puppet strings, the psychological gravity, the invisible choreography that guides people's behavior. And in doing so, you've stepped away from the crowd. It feels like standing in the middle of a bustling city street, while everyone moves according to a rhythm. Only they can hear a rhythm you no longer follow. And to understand this isolation more deeply, imagine a person, let's call her Mira. Mira grew up in a house where love was loud, unpredictable, and often painful. A place where affection could turn into criticism without warning, where comfort and fear mingled in the same breath. As a child, she learned to anticipate emotional storms before they formed, reading micro-expressions, like weather patterns. She grew hyper-attuned, always on alert, always adjusting herself to avoid triggering the next eruption. Years later, as an adult, Mira becomes the friend everyone relies on, the one who senses tension before anyone speaks it aloud, the one who diffuses arguments with quiet grace, the one who apologizes even when she's done nothing wrong. People admire her emotional intelligence, her sensitivity, her intuition, but no one sees the cost, the exhaustion, the constant scanning of emotional landscapes, the inability to rest fully inside her own skin. One day, during a conversation with someone she cares about, she notices it happening again. She is shrinking herself, contorting her voice, cushioning every word to avoid causing discomfort. And suddenly, she catches it, not just the behavior, but the origin. She feels the old fear rise in her bones, the memory of walking on eggshells as a child. And in that moment, she stops. She breathes. She realizes the pattern is not hers. It's inherited, absorbed, copied from a place of survival. But when she tries to explain this to others, when she tries to share what she sees, they don't understand. They think she's overanalyzing, being dramatic, making ghosts out of nothing. And so she retreats into silence, not because she wants to be alone, but because she can't unsee what she now sees so clearly. This is the isolation of awakening the distance created by clarity, the quiet ache of knowing too much. And if you've ever felt this, then you already know. Seeing the truth is only the first step. Living with it, that's where the real journey begins. But awareness alone is never the ending. It is the beginning of a new conflict, one that unfolds quietly within you like a tide pulling in two directions at once. There is the part of you that wants to speak the truth now that you finally see it, the part that wants to name the pattern, break the cycle, confront the inheritance that has shaped you for so long. And then there is the other part, the cautious one, the protective one, the part built from years of watching reactions, like flickering flames that whispers, "Don't say anything, don't disturb the peace, don't expose what others aren't ready to see." You feel this tension vibrate through your relationships. Moments arise where you want to gently tell someone you love, "You're not angry at me." You're replaying something from your past. Or you're shutting down not because of this moment, but because someone taught you to fear emotions. You want to offer clarity, not judgment, illumination, rather than blame. But you hesitate, because you know that truth, when spoken too soon or too directly, can feel like an attack. And so you live in that delicate space between wanting to heal and wanting to protect, between daring to be honest and fearing the collapse that honesty might bring. It becomes a moral dilemma. Do you intervene and risk the relationship? Or do you stay silent and allow the cycle to continue? This is not an easy choice. It carries emotional weight, because part of you fears becoming like the people who once silenced you, while another part fears becoming invisible again. And so you oscillate, sometimes speaking too boldly and feeling guilty afterward, sometimes staying too quiet and feeling like you've abandoned your own truth. The conflict is not just external, it is within you. A war between who you were, who you are becoming, and who you are afraid to be. And as this war deepens, something inside you begins to fray. You start to notice how exhausting it is to feel everything so intensely, to perceive the subtle emotional currents beneath every interaction, to carry not just your own history, but the shadows of everyone else's as well. You think too much, analyze too much, empathize too much, until the world becomes a blur of overlapping narratives and inherited fears. This is the beginning of the collapse, the moment when awareness becomes overwhelming, when your mind feels like a room filled with echoes that don't belong to you. You feel every tension in conversations, like a tremor beneath your skin. You sense the hidden meanings behind people's words long before they do. You anticipate reactions, predict disappointments, brace for emotional storms that haven't even formed yet. It is a strange kind of burnout, not caused by work or responsibility, but by emotional overexposure, the burden of seeing, too, deeply. Imagine your mind as a sponge, soaked beyond its capacity, dripping with every memory, every pattern, every subtle cue. Or imagine standing in a hall of mirrors where each reflection is a different version of someone who once shaped you, their behaviors overlapping with your own until you no longer know where they end and you begin. The collapse is not dramatic. It is subtle, internal. It's waking up feeling like your thoughts aren't entirely yours. It's going through the day with a heaviness in your chest, as if carrying invisible weights. It's longing for silence, not the absence of sound, but the absence of emotional noise. Sometimes you become irritable without knowing why. Sometimes you dissociate, drifting through conversations as if underwater. Sometimes you retreat into solitude, not because you dislike people, but because your mind cannot withstand another wave of inherited emotion. And in those moments, you wonder if awareness was a blessing or a curse. You wonder if it would have been easier to remain blind to the patterns, to keep living unconsciously, to stay part of the crowd that moves without questioning the weight they carry. But deep down, even in the collapse, you know that blindness is no longer an option. You've seen too much. You've felt too deeply. You've awakened to your own psychological inheritance, and though it exhausts you, it also whispers the possibility of becoming someone new. But collapse, as painful as it feels, is not the end of your story. It is the threshold. Because when everything inside you breaks open, when the inherited noise becomes too loud to bear, something remarkable begins to emerge from the cracks. Revelation. Not the bright, euphoric, kind people tend to romanticize, but a quiet, grounded wisdom that rises from exhaustion like a soft ember glowing in the ashes. You begin to understand that awareness was never meant to be carried as a weight. It was meant to be used as a light, a tool, a guide. You realize that seeing patterns doesn't obligate you to fix them in others. It doesn't require you to heal everyone you understand. You begin to understand the difference between compassion and responsibility, between empathy and entanglement. You notice that you don't need to absorb every emotional signal around you. Some can be witnessed without being carried. You learn that boundaries are not walls. They are doors with handles on your side. You can open them when you choose, close them when needed, and still remain kind. This is the revelation. You are allowed to choose how deeply you participate in the world. You no longer have to be the emotional sponge, the fixer, the interpreter of unspoken pain. You can let people feel what they feel. You can let people be responsible for their own reactions. You can let silence exist without rushing to fill it. And as you practice this, something shifts inside you. The world softens. Your shoulders relax. You begin to feel the difference between inherited reactions and conscious actions. You begin to catch the impulse to repeat an old pattern and gently redirect yourself. You begin to respond instead of repeat. And slowly, the emotional noise that once overwhelmed you becomes more manageable. You learn to step back from the brink of collapse and return to the center of your own presence. Light returns not all at once, but in small, steady breaths. You find yourself becoming someone you've never been before. Someone who sees clearly without drowning in the vision. Someone who feels deeply without losing themselves in the depth. Someone who understands the past without being defined by it. You become someone who can hold the truth without being consumed by it. And from this newfound steadiness grows something even deeper. Integration. The final step. The quiet stitching together of all that you have seen, all that you have felt, all that you have unlearned. Integration is not dramatic. It is not cinematic. It is gentle, like the slow unfurling of dawn after a long night. It happens in small ways. In the moment you choose patience instead of inherited anger. In the moment you allow yourself to rest instead of earning survival through overthinking. In the moment you speak your truth without trembling. In the moment you soften with someone and realize the danger you once felt is no longer here. Integration is the understanding that your past shaped you but does not own you. It is the quiet courage to say, "This behavior came from them, not from me, and I choose differently." It is the realization that imitation was once a form of survival, but consciousness can now become your freedom. And as this truth settles into your bones, you begin to see your story differently. You no longer resent the patterns you once copied. You understand why they formed, why they protected you, why they were necessary at the time. You hold them with compassion, then release them like old clothes that no longer fit. And as you do, something beautiful happens. You return to yourself, not the self shaped by trauma or inheritance, but the self you were always meant to become. A self that belongs to you. A self crafted not from fear, but from choice. And as you stand here at the end of this long inward journey, you can finally revisit the question that began it all. If I've been shaped by those who hurt me, who am I really? And now, after everything you've seen, everything you've felt, everything you've questioned and reclaimed, your answer comes quietly, steadily, with a kind of peace that feels like truth. I am the one who breaks the pattern. I am the one who chooses what continues and what ends. I am the point where the cycle turns into something new. And in this realization lies your freedom not to escape the past, but to transform it into wisdom, into compassion, into strength. You are no longer the echo of someone else's pain. You are the author of your own becoming. You carry the past lightly now, not as a burden, but as a compass that points you toward the life you can consciously create. And as you step forward, breathing in the soft air of your own reclaimed identity, you understand something simple and profound. You are not doomed to become the people who hurt you. You are shaped by them, yes, but not defined by them. You are the continuation, but you are also the correction. And in choosing who you become now, in choosing with awareness, with courage, with tenderness, you finally break free from the illusion that the past must dictate your future. You step into your own presence. You step into your own name. You step into yourself, and for the first time, you truly feel like you are home.